I'm Callie, I'm from America, and today I'm going to talk about the top 5 situations in Korea where I really wish that I could speak Korean well. So, the first one, and this is a big one, is always the bank. Going to the bank here is always a very stressful thing for me, and I think number one, the language is very hard. I don't know, when I came to Korea, I learned how to say I learned how to order at a restaurant or do something like that, but the first things you learn when you're learning a language isn't, can I open a banking account, or can I set up online banking? You don't learn those things. Those aren't really survival skills, when you're in a new country. So that's always something I struggle with, is the language when I'm at a bank. And I feel like it's something that not only I struggle with the language, is like the workers there. They always seem really like uncomfortable or worried or afraid when they see me come in, because they're like, how can I talk about financial stuff? This is hard stuff to talk about in your native language sometimes. Like, how can I talk about finances in a second language to a foreigner? I totally get it, because so when I go to a bank, I see everyone be like, oh man, no, not the foreigner. And I feel the same way. I'm like, I'm sorry, like, it's gotta happen. We gotta do this. So I think that's something, the bank is always very complicated, language-wise, and then also just the system is very different than it is in America, and to me it seems quite complex. Here in Korea, everything is all connected. Your phone, your phone contract, your banking stuff. For me, I think like, I just got to go to the bank and get in my online banking set up. And in the States, it's quite easy, probably because maybe it's not so secure. I'm not really sure. I've never had any issues, but now that I know the steps that you must go through in order to do it in Korea, I'm like, on one hand, I'm like, it's annoying because it's so much work and it takes so long and it's so complex and confusing. But then I'm like, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it means it's more secure. Maybe it's not. I don't really know. But that's my theory. And I'm going to go with that because it makes me feel better when I'm going through all this. I'm like, it's good. No one's going to hack into my stuff. And I think a lot of banking stuff is maybe just not set up for foreigners yet also, which makes it difficult. So I've had to change banks many times, because that's another thing I don't really understand, is it seems like every job that you have here, you need to have that specific bank. And in the States, it wasn't really like that. They were like, give us your bank and your account number and you're good to go. We're here in Korea, my first job was, I've had 4 or 5 different banks here now, because my first job was like, we do NH. My second job was like, you must have Hana. And it just made it very complex, and each bank had its own rules. Some were more, foreigner friendly than others, and it's just always a mess. It's always very stressful going to the bank, and I really wish that I could communicate better when I go to the bank. The second one is the hospital, and I will say that when you go to a lot of the bigger hospitals here, number one, the doctors or nurses, they can often speak English, or if they don't, I've been to a hospital where they had, a certain worker there just to help foreigners, and she'll walk around the hospital with you. She'll go to the receptionist with you, and then she'll lead you up to wherever you have to go to get checked. And I thought that was really, really nice and so helpful. But I have been to more like specialized doctor, maybe like a nose and ear doctor or throat doctor or something like that, where it's a little bit smaller scale, and communication can be hard at those kinds of places. And I feel like the reason why I'm stressing this one is because, again, similar to the banking thing, it's hard to talk about finances. It's hard to talk about, medical stuff in a different language. And that's a situation when I really want to know what's going on. So I might have complex questions and they might have complex answers. And if neither of us is fluent in each other's language, it can be stressful. And I'm always worried, like even when I go to the pharmacy, I want to know what kind of medicine I'm taking. Like that's just me, that's my personality. I feel like many times here they're like, oh, just take all these pills and you'll feel better. And that's fine, but I want to know what medicine I'm taking. Like, what medicine is this? Like, I have a lot of questions when I go to the doctors, and sometimes like the pharmacists, they just can't explain it to me because, it's complex and it's hard to talk about, and especially if in a second language, it's very hard to talk about. So those are situations when I really wish I could speak Korean. Another situation where I really wish that I could speak Korean, and this is a very personal one, is I'm vegan. So talking about veganism is a little bit difficult, and not just because of language, but also because I think in Korea it's not quite so, well known or popular to be vegan here. I think it's a fairly newer concept and people are just now learning about it more and maybe getting interested in it more, where in the States, I'd say it's a little bit more common. So when I go to a restaurant, I can pretty easily say like, oh, does this have, egg in it? Or can you take the meat out? Or I can ask about things like that in a restaurant. But, veganism is a little bit more than just your food. Sometimes it can be your clothes, it can be alcohol, something like that. So, for example, I was shopping for wine one time and I really wanted to get a vegan-friendly wine because the reason why some wines aren't vegan is the process from which it's made. Like they'll use bones sometimes, bone char or like animal bones to process the wine. And so I was at the store one time, it was like E-Mart or something, and I was like, how can I explain this in Korean? And I basically just said to the worker, I was like, 저는 채식주의자입니다. And I was trying to ask, is the wine vegan? Is it okay? And then she was like, of course it's vegan. She's probably just thinking, there's no meat in it, there's no milk in it, it's wine. How could this not be vegan? But, I wanted to explain, no, not the ingredients of the wine, but how it's made. But I just couldn't explain all of that in Korean, unfortunately. So, yeah, luckily I have a few vegan Korean friends now. I was able to message them and ask them about it, so it was fine. But situations like that, I really wish I could explain myself more and express myself a little bit more. Number 4 is just when I'm in large groups with other Korean people. So I'm generally a very social person, I would say. I love meeting new people. I like, engaging in conversation with people. And usually, when I'm in a smaller group with Korean people, they're so nice and they either speak in English with me, or 2, at least they're so patient and they'll listen to me struggle with Korean. So I always appreciate that with a small group, and with a larger group it's just harder because there's so many conversations going on and everyone's talking fast and I can't really keep up with the conversation, and something funny might happen. I want to put in my 2 cents, but it's just difficult in those larger group situations to be able to do that. So yeah, I really wish that I can get to the level of Korean where that becomes a little bit more natural and I'm able to add to the conversation a little bit more. And then the last and final situation is going to the immigration office. And I think it's interesting because you would think maybe at an immigration office it's very, friendly for people who speak other languages to come in and get help. And in some situations, I have been able to, figure it out. Maybe they have the sheet there and it has some English forms and it's okay. I do think there's like a help desk you can technically ask if you need, you know, some guidance or whatever. But this last time specifically, because I wasn't on a teacher visa anymore, I had to get a different visa, and it was just it was a very difficult process. There was a lot of forms we had to get, you know, we had to give more in-depth interviews and stuff like that, and because of that I had to get a lot of help from Korean friends, because I couldn't do it. You know, they were asking a lot of more complex questions about my employment and, you know, my plans in Korea and stuff like that, and, you know, they couldn't really speak fluent English. I can't speak fluent Korean yet, unfortunately. So that was like, yeah, really difficult, and I just wish it was a little bit easier, a little bit of an easier process, and hopefully I keep studying Korean hard, and yeah, check back in a couple months. We'll see if I improve at any of these. If I can ever go to the bank and tell them what I want to do in Korean, yes, that's the goal. That's the dream.